How you doing, guys and gals? This is Doug Wilson from Yellowhawk Custom Outdoors. A lot of you know that I'm picking up my leather working skills and proceeding forward with them. It's going to be a slow process because you know how I am. It's got to be perfect. And if it's not something I would purchase, I won't offer to anyone else. So I gotta get back into the groove of things. This video is, I'm just going to show you a couple of Kydex sheaths, and then I'm going to show you how to wet form a sheath to a knife. It's not hard to do, but it produces dramatic results and great retention for you guys that don't really like Kydex. Alright, so you guys stay tuned and we'll get right to it. How you doing, guys and gals? This is Doug Wilson from Yellowhawk Custom Outdoors. I have my niece here with me today. We're the parents. They're off doing their own thing. And I have my niece, Grace, here. Grace, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, how you doing?
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
I'm going to do this video for these guys. You okay? Alright? Alright, go upstairs and play, okay? I'll call you when we're done, okay? Thanks, babe. Okay, so here's what we got. A lot of you know that I'm picking up my leather working where I left off. It's going to take me a while to brush up, because the last time I made anything out of leather was like 4 years ago. So, and you've seen some of those pictures. They're on my Facebook page. I've posted them, you know, pouches and stuff like that. So basically what I want to do today is I want to introduce you to a knife. Oh, here it is. Introduce you to a knife made by a buddy of mine. And I'm making him a sheath for his. This is the Native Survival knife. The Native Survival knife. It's designed by Mitch Mitchell from Native Survival and built by LT Wright. LT Wright is the company that's going to build my Delta Whiskey Infinity. He's working on the prototype now. So I have no idea when I'm going to get it. Hopefully before November, so I can put it through its paces, and if there's any changes that need to be made, we'll make them, and we'll make another prototype, and you know how it goes. Okay, testing. I love testing. It's got to be the best it can be. That's all there is to it. Okay, so Mitch Mitchell from Native Survival, and he's got a YouTube channel. Mitch Mitchell is by far one of the most knowledgeable outdoorsmen I've ever had the pleasure of spending time around. You know, I spent 3 or 4 days with him up in Massachusetts several months ago, last winter, this past winter. And the guy is very knowledgeable. He's a great guy. He's real quiet. He usually isn't real talkative about things unless you ask him a question. So I really have a lot of respect for Mitch. He was on the first season of Alone and decided to tap out. His mom was real sick and he had to come home. So I can understand that. Otherwise, I think he would have taken it. He is like one of them extraordinary people that are really good at what they do. And I like people like that. It shows pride in their work, you know, American pride. You know, I just like people like that. They're, you know, responsible, high integrity, usually very honorable, usually. Sometimes not. But here we go. Native Survival knife. Now this is not a I'm going to work with this knife and show it to you video. I'm going to give you an up close look at it, And then I'm going to show you how I wet mold the sheath that comes with this, the leather sheath. You can wet mold it and get Kydex-like retention. Okay, so I'm not going to be working with it, but I'm going to give you a really good look at it. 01 tool steel, cryo-quenched, cryo-treated. It's got a generous micarta handle on it. Now these scales do what I really like a knife to do, fill up the hand. The leverage you get and the comfort that you feel on the handle directly translate into how usable and stable that blade's going to be for you on the other end. So here's the handle, the other end of the knife is the blade. So it's going to be directly, you know, that handle directly affects how that blade works. If it's really comfortable and fills up your hand well, you know, fills up all the nooks and crannies, you're going to get a phenomenal purchase on this knife. And that's what it does. It's got a small finger guard here and a pinky guard here. This does two things. It keeps that knife in your hand this way, okay? Say you got to crush nuts or acorns, and you can do it with this knife. You can crush acorns and process cordage and stuff like that. You can do that with the butt of this knife. Micarta is strong enough. I wouldn't go pounding the shit out of it, but it does pretty good. G10 I think is a little stronger, but micarta does a great job. I do it all the time with my micarta knives. I pound, you know, stuff with them, and it works. So you can process anything you need. That's one aspect of this pinky tool. The other one is when you put it in the sheath, and you got, like I'm Wetform in this one, you put it in there, it gives you something to grab without just having a round handle there that you're going to slip off. Because this sheath that I'm getting ready to show you, the one that's finished, it has really good retention, and you know, you might slip off of it if this wasn't here, if that pinky choil wasn't there. So there it is, the Native Survival knife. It's like a rust colored with like OD green scales, liners, sorry. The blade, let's see what the blade is. The blade itself, from spine to the tip of the edge, is exactly 3/4 of an inch. That's what I'm getting on this. It may be a little longer, maybe a little less, but about 3/4 of an inch wide. The blade is 4 inches with a 4-inch cutting surface. So there's no real sharpening choil here. There is a very small ricasso, but it doesn't affect anything because it's kind of buried in the profile of the scales. So I'm pretty sure this knife is going to Kydex very well. I think I can get good retention out of this. It's not much, but we can do it. We can do it. It might take a little trick or two, but we can do it. There it is. 90-degree spine, real sharp 90-degree spine. A small Scandi grind on it. I have no idea how it works, how effective it is. I'm willing to bet this thing's a beast at smaller woodworking tasks. Willing to bet. You will see it again on a show you video, and then I'm going to work with it, give you my opinion and all that neat stuff. Okay? It is very comfortable. I have to stress that. Not real big overall, maybe 8 inches, 8.5. Overall, 9.25 inches. Overall, thereabouts. Okay, let's get to this video. There's the knife. There's his Native Survival symbol there. See it? His logo, and then the pout house from LT Wright. And I'm pretty sure my next knife that's being built by LT Wright, the Infinity, is going to have my logo stamped into it. I'm pretty sure. I think we hashed that out. If not, I guess I got to get on that. So, and it's going to have the pout house on the other side. Here's what we got. Here is the sheath that I wet molded last night. I wet molded this last night. Now, it's all waxed up, it's treated, it's ready to go. Now, I took the initiative to wet mold both sides of the sheath because I could. You're going to get better retention if you wet mold both sides of the sheath. It's going to give you better retention. It's just, you know, that's kind of a no-brainer. I like to mold the profile of the edge because, now this is just a personal opinion, some guys don't like to wet mold like this and wet mold the sheath because they're afraid of cutting the sheath as they put it in. I'm usually pretty careful when I put a knife in a sheath, and I find that, you know, where it's supposed to be, and then I put that puppy in there. Okay, this one damn near clicks in, and if you wet mold it right, there, you can get it out of there. Generally, you can get it out of there, but it's hard. I mean, just, it's coming, all right? Eventually it'll come out of there, but it's in there pretty secure. It's not Kydex retention, but it's Kydex-like. The only thing with wet molding is, once you finish it, if this sheath gets wet, it'll probably relax again a little bit. It's not going to completely lose its shape, or it's wet forming, but leather generally absorbs water, especially if it's not treated on the inside. And I don't think these sheaths that come with the knife are treated on the inside. So what I do is I put snow seal on the knife and just run it in and out. You know what I mean? Now go upstairs, babe. Okay? Go upstairs and play. I'll call you when I'm finished. Thanks. Okay. I'm real hesitant with kids around knives. You know, she's in my charge. So you know how it goes. All right, so Kydex-like retention. If you get it wet, it could relax a little bit, but all you got to do is, you know, when you get home, if it's still wet or damp or whatever, I tell you, when I wet mold a sheath, I'll take a burnisher out to the field with me, or use something out there. If the sheath gets wet, I'll, you know, generally do it with my fingers or a burnisher or whatever. Okay? So there's the wet molded sheath I did last night for it. It's completely dry now. I tell you, the retention is pretty damn good. Like I said, not Kydex, but pretty damn good. So, and it's definitely not as good as leather over Kydex that, you know, I've been doing the last month or so. Turned out real well. So I'm gonna talk about see, it's in there. I'm gonna talk about wet forming this sheath right here. Now this is a sheath that comes on Mike Wallace's knives if you opt for leather. JT, I'm pretty sure he's in New Mexico. He's a pretty good sheath maker. You know, he does basic stuff in high volume. And he's relatively inexpensive. But for this sheath, he used 12-ounce leather, which for certain knives, that would be a great choice. For wet forming, it's hard. 12-ounce leather is hard to wet form. Maybe not every piece of 12-ounce leather. This one is. This is veg tanned leather, and that's what generally it should be, because veg tanned leather takes a molding better than chrome tanned or oil tanned, or, you know, chrome oil tanned or oil veg tanned. A completely veg tanned leather takes molding better than the other leathers do. So it's difficult though. So we got what we got here. This one was easier because this one's like 8 to 10 ounce or 8 to 9 ounce leather. So we got, this is a burnisher. It's just a piece of wood all smoothed out. This is for edges. This is for big edges, like, you know, these big edges right here. This is burnishing. And what it does is it compresses the leather, makes it all nice and tidy and neat looking, and allows that welt to repel debris and water and stuff like that easier. So that's a burnisher. There's all types. There's another one. This is one of my old burnishers. This one is kind of brand new. When you get a burnisher and you're going to burnish, just go on eBay and type in leather burnisher and a whole shitload of them will pop up. I don't know what these go for. 10 bucks. I think I paid $5 for this one, something like that. They're not, you know, like technologically advanced pieces of gear. You know, it's pieces of wood that are smooth. The more you use it, the more smooth it gets. So basically what you do is you take that burnisher and you start, well, you got to wet the leather first. You got to soak it. Now I've already started this one because I don't want to make this video a press fest, because I've really had to work to get it to this point. It is time consuming, but if you do it and stay with it, you're going to get a good wet molded sheath out of it. And basically you soak the sheath. I do it in warm water, and you start working. You put that knife where you want it. I always put it up against the spine. That's always easiest for me. Put it up against the spine and start working that leather. Now, let me see if I can't. See if I can't get that down there. Okay? We're going to work this leather around all the contours of the handle first. Okay? And when you begin, you can actually do it with your fingers first and get a basic mold, and then start working with your burnisher. Now, be careful with burnishers. Sometimes they have burrs on them. I always take a really fine 6000 grit or whatever and polish them off. You know what I mean? I polish them off so that they're nice and smooth, and as you use them, they'll get even smoother. I always work with the edges first. The edges are going to be the hardest. I even do the blade on mine a lot. I don't always do the blade, but I like my knife firm in that sheath. Now you got to be careful because guys who have fingernails that extend past the you know, the tip of their finger or whatever, you know, any type of nail, if you catch that leather with your nail as you're burnishing, it's going to put a scar in it. So I suggest you clip your fingernails pretty short before you do this, because trust me, it's going to happen. And you're going to put little dimples in the leather that you don't want. Now, they're fairly easy to get out, but sometimes a nail will actually cut the epidermis. This is the epidermis of the leather is the top part. It's the skin of the animal, the very top of the skin where the hair was. That's the epidermis. You'll scratch that and then it'll put a scar in it, and you can't get rid of that. You want to keep that epidermis intact by using only smooth tools. These are small burnishers. Now I'm not going to use them yet. These are brand new. And the reason I'm not going to use them yet is because I need to polish them first. These burnishers that you buy, even the good ones, they should be polished before they get to you. Sometimes they're not. And even a small burr will put a scar in the leather. You want this thing completely smooth and polished. So I just take a 4000 grit polishing pad, and I use successive grits. I use a polishing pad. Now a lot of these tools are chrome coated or nickel coated. Don't worry about it. It just, you can polish it, no big deal. Unless it's really cheap and it starts flaking off on you, then I would just buy a different tool. These were like $7, $8, all these tools. And these, what these do is they get into the nooks and crannies that your bigger burnishers can't get into. But you got to be careful because you can cut the leather with these. If you go too hard, you can stretch the epidermis and bust it and leave a scar. But that's what these are for. I think I'm safe enough to use this one. Okay, and these are a little more angular. You can get in tighter spots, and then once you got it nice and burnished in those tight spots, it allows you to get into those nooks and crannies. You can go back to your wood burnisher and use that. Now there are treatments that you can put on leather to make it easier to wet form. I don't like using them. I think it might affect the treatment, you know, the waterproofing treatment that I put on the sheath. So I usually don't do it. I usually don't use any preparation solutions to make it easier to wet form. It's easy enough, but like I said, you're going around all the contours of the knife. The hand guard or the finger guard is the most important. That's where you're going to get most of your retention from. If it's a small hand guard like the Native Survival knife, you're really going to have to get in there and get that leather nice and formed in that area, so that when you put it in the oven, and yeah, you're going to put this in the oven, when you put it in the oven for 10 minutes at, you know, 140 degrees or 120 degrees, not too hot. I think I mentioned this before on another video. Leather has cells in it, just like your skin. Okay, it's basically skin with fatty tissue underneath and whatnot, but they're fibers, they're cells in there at a microscopic level. This is getting a little technical, but you know how I am. You can heat it up so much that the cells start to burst, and that will weaken your leather. So don't make your leather too hot. You'll be doing yourself a grave disservice if you make your leather too hot in that oven. So just, you know, if it's too hot to touch, then it's too hot. Now I put it on the lowest setting and I start from there, and I put it in for 10 minutes, take it out, work with it a little bit, put it in for 10 minutes, take it out, work with it a little bit. By the time you've done 3 heating cycles, you'll have this thing pretty rock hard and ready to go. And then I think the next video is going to be on how to treat it when we're finished. When you're finished wet molding, and that's what I did with this one last night, I lightly oiled it to put some essential oils back in the leather. If you oil it too much, you're going to soften the leather and you're going to lose some of your detail. If it's too much, you'll lose a lot of your detail, and I think it ruins the sheath. But a little bit of oil just to coat it and let it soak in a little bit, and then I use Snow Seal. I do 3 or 4 applications of Snow Seal. That you can actually let it soak in by hitting it with a hair dryer, and just you hit it until it starts to melt into the leather, and you stop the heat. And then after, you know, 3, 4 applications, you got this thing pretty well weatherproofed, but it's still not going to be 100%, especially if your inside's not treated. Out in the rain, out in the bush, when it rains, depending on how hard it rains, you're going to get water inside that sheath. Even if the knife is in it, it will work its way down there if it stays out there long enough. So you can see it's got gaps around at the top. You're not going to get it perfect up there, because that's the opening of the sheath. You want it fairly wide. so that you can actually get the knife in there without cutting the leather. So I'm going to slip this one back in, and you're probably asking, well, how come that one doesn't look as tight as the one you did last night? That's because this leather is substantially thicker than this leather. So it's more difficult to work with, and you got to continue to break it down enough to get it into the nooks and crannies so that it takes the form of the handle a lot nicer. And basically that's all there is to wet forming. I didn't show you all the steps, but it's not rocket science. If you get to a certain point where you're satisfied with the contours that you have, and like I said, not everybody does the blade part. I like to do it because I don't like it wiggling at all, or as little as I can make it. Okay, it will deform the sheath a little bit. You can see it's kind of deformed. Just straighten it out again. There it is. Okay, this is doing rather well. I'm probably not going to get it really tight unless I work with it for an hour. Sometimes that's what it takes. Now, I'll say this. Sometimes guys don't do the back of the sheath because this is where the belt loop is, and it's not seen. However, sometimes I will put a light wet form on the back. Some guys don't do it. I like it. You know, if you're going to do it, do it. So I'll start doing it this way, and what it does is it meets up with what you did on the front. That's what ends up happening. It meets up with what you did on the front and makes it pretty tight. Now I'm checking the blade right now to see how the blade runs. There we go. Yep, that's pretty good. Alright, so basically you just keep working with it. Make sure you don't press too hard. The spine, I flatten it usually by taking the knife out and doing this. You can actually use a rolling pin for this if it's smooth enough. I can't stress that enough. Your tools have to be extremely smooth, or you will cut that epidermal layer and scar it, and then, you know, there's a blemish in your hide for the rest of the life of the sheath. So that's how I flatten the spine out, and then you just continue to go around it, molding that wet leather until it's reasonably damp, not soaked anymore, not wet, and then you start your oven process. You start your oven process. You can see I'm starting to do it on the back now, and it's meeting up. Now the front, I always leave the front more pronounced. It just works out that way for me. But it meets up with what you did on the front and just holds it even tighter. This one's working out good. It's just this leather is really thick. And I tell you, last night, just with the 9 to 10 ounce, I was sweating my butt off doing this right here with the fan on. I was really, I get aggressive with it. But you can see it turns out real nice. Now the blade itself, okay, real tight. This one actually clicks in a little bit, just a click, okay? Can't hear it, it's leather. The blade of the knife, because you're working with wet leather, if it's a high carbon steel blade, if it's somebody else's blade, I would put saran wrap on it. Saran wrap, you know, 2 layers of saran wrap. I try to make sure it's not so overlapped and funky looking. I try to make it nice and neat and cut the edges and then fold it over. I'm pretty anal about this stuff. But put saran wrap on it so it doesn't rust the blade. It will rust the blade just by working with it if it's a high carbon steel, like 01 tool steel. If I left this knife in this damp sheath for an hour or two, it would have little specks of carbonization on it. Definitely. Absolutely. I've done it before. It's not a good thing. And as soon as you start those little those little rust spots, as soon as they start, that's what opens it up to really start rusting. So you want to keep your blades nice and polished. I use these polishing pads from Micromark, www.micromark.com. They're polishing pads, and they go from like, I don't know, 800 grit all the way up to 12,000. And I tell you, I polish my blades with them, and that is what keeps my blades down to bare metal, so that they don't even want to start rusting generally, unless they're left somewhere. Be careful doing the spine. Even with these polishing pads, you can take the sharp edge off of a spine. So I wouldn't even, if you're going to do it real lightly, straight across. Don't can it or turn it in any way, because then you'll ruin some of that sharp edge that you actually want for scraping bark and scraping, striking ferro rods and things like that. I don't advocate striking a ferro rod with the spine of my knife, but some guys do it. Sometimes I do it. It just depends on whether I can find a striker or whatever, but I don't like to do it because you're going to need that for other things. You're just going to need it for other things. If it's dulled out from striking a ferro rod, you're going to be less effective with that knife. All right, I think that's it. Here's another sheath. This one's made by JT as well. This is a sheath that came with another one of Mike Wallace's knives. These are just simple sheaths. Veg tanned leather, but he uses like 12 ounce, real thick stuff. I like these tooling patterns. He's got it pretty simple sheaths. All right, guys. Okay, so that's it for this video. I just wanted to show you how I wet form the Native Survival knife sheath that comes with it from LT Wright. This is Doug Wilson, Yellow Hawk Customs Outdoors. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.